Hey guys, welcome back for another reaction. Today, I'll be reacting to 10 freedoms you have in Poland but not in America. This is another recommended video and I'm very interested to see this. So let's get into this.
So some people will say that America is one of the freest countries in the world, but how true is that? Today we're going to talk about the 10 ways where Poland is actually freer than America.
Let's see.
Please tell me I'm
Tipping.
not the only one that thinks tipping culture is absolutely ridiculous. It's gotten to the point where people who
Yes.
are working at cafes, self-serve yogurt shops, I'm doing all the work, but I still have to tip the person that's working behind the counter? That doesn't make any sense to me. And as you travel around the world, you realize
Yeah.
this tipping thing is kind of crazy because it's not the responsibility of the consumers to pay the wage of the workers. That's the owner's job. Number 9, the freedom of consumer.
Yeah, that is really crazy and I'm not against tipping, but I just hate when in the US you're forced to tip 20%. Like I don't mind tipping, especially when the workers are really good and really nice.
Protections. Something that bugged me a little bit when I first arrived to Europe was like every time you go to a new website, they ask you for permission if they can get your information or cookies and you have to accept or reject. And I'm like, this is getting tedious having to do this for every website. But then I realized in America, they don't even ask you. They just take your information away and they give it to other people. Is it just me or is it annoying
Yeah,
how every single thing now requires you to make an account? Like, can I just enjoy it without having to make an account? I don't know who
that's
has my phone number,
true.
who has my email. I'm getting all these spam messages everywhere. It's crazy, right? Here in Europe, they have a lot of protections for that. Whoa. So over time, I'm like, okay, there are some EU rules that I think are beneficial to the
That's
consumer.
nice.
Apparently, there's also this rule where you can return items after 14 days for whatever reason whatsoever. I'm not entirely
Ooh,
sure how true that is, but it's nice that here they protect the consumer in a lot of ways. Number 8, the
that
freedom to
is
be able to
nice.
raise independent kids. One of the most beautiful things about this country is when I'm on public transportation in the center of the city and I see kids that are 8 years old, 10 years old, traveling by themselves or with their friends without any adult supervision. This is one of
Really?
the reasons why I really like public transportation as well, because it's accessible to everybody. When it's connected to all over the city, you can pretty much do whatever you want. People are very connected to their family, but a level of independence, especially with the women, seems to be encouraged because Poland is so homogenous. Society watches over your kids for you to a certain extent, right? There are certain lines that won't be crossed in public, such as hitting a woman in public is definitely not encouraged here. I think men will stand up for that. When you're
That's
on public
good.
transportation, the young people, boys and girls, will give up their seat for older people, which I also find very
Oh,
beautiful. Safety is also very important here. If you compare the murder rate or just any rate, to be honest, whether it comes to theft, to sexual abuse, to violent crime, it's significantly less than it is in the US. America used to be like that too. When everybody's optimistic, the country is progressing forward, people are getting richer, there is no reason for people to commit crime. One of
yeah, I've heard Poland is one of the safest country in the world, and it's nice to hear that there's young kids that can just go by themselves, alone by themselves, not being worried if somebody would kidnap them, or like parents that would be worried that their kids might be abducted by bad people, you know? That's really nice.
the big freedoms you have here in Poland is the ability to say what you want. And when it comes to humor and just making jokes in general, there's a much higher tolerance for what you can say here as opposed to America, where everybody's trying to correct other people on what's offensive and what's not. I've heard that that's definitely
Yes.
changing now in America because people are getting really sick of this PC behavior. But I recently saw this video of a senator asking a
Can men
doctor,
get
can a
pregnant?
biological man get
What?
pregnant?
Dr. Verma, I wasn't sure I understood your answer to Senator Moody a moment ago. Do you think that men can get pregnant?
And she refuses to answer still. And this is supposed to be a
What?
scientist.
I also think yes no questions like this are a political tool.
I think the intention behind political correctness is good, but the way that it is enforced is very unrealistic. For example, like if
Mm-hmm.
you're in a group with a bunch of guys, we're gonna be talking shit. We're gonna be saying a bunch of effed up jokes, but that's how we bond. I'm pretty sick and tired of people policing me on what I can or cannot say, especially when it comes to making fun of my own race. There's this weird thing in America where people will get offended on my behalf, which I think is really, really weird. Whereas here, we're allowed to joke about ourselves, and I have a very diverse friend group. There are jokes everywhere, but in my opinion, when you're among
Really?
friends, these are some of the funniest jokes that you can make, right? So I don't think that you should muzzle people because it
Yeah.
doesn't maybe sound nice to you. Here in Poland, people don't care that much. People have a dark sense of humor in a good way, so you're able to pretty much talk
Really?
about whatever you want. And I love that. If you are thinking
That
about
is
moving to
really
Poland, I highly
interesting.
recommend this for people who come from Polish families. If you're Asian, if you're American, especially if you're conservative, Poland is an amazing place to live. If you guys are curious and are thinking about moving to Poland, I highly recommend setting a meeting with me here. Number 6, the freedom of not needing a car. This is one of the most annoying
Wow,
things
that is
about
nice.
America in general. And yes, certain cities have good public transportation, but in general, America is a car first society. So that means that when you move to
Yes.
America, number 1, you have to find a place to rent, but number 2, you also have to have a vehicle. Maintaining a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle is so expensive with all the fees that you have to pay just for the car itself, plus insurance, plus gas. And I didn't realize how much money I
Especially
was saving
right
until
now.
I left the US and I sold my car, and I'm like, yo, it's nice having a car, but is it worth all the headache and responsibility? Not really. I also love
Yeah.
that in Europe, you can pretty much use public transportation for everything. You can take trains or planes to go to other countries. You can use trains to pretty much get to any city here in Poland. They have a really good tram system. Here in Warsaw, they have a metro system as well. The public transport infrastructure in many places around the world is excellent. And I wish that America was like that, but unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
it is not.
Yeah, I reacted to the public transportations in Poland, and I'm really shocked how convenient it is there. Like, really nice. I wish that they have that not just in the US, but also anywhere in the world, like how convenient it is. It's crazy.
Also, because Poland is a European country, there are a lot of work-life protections when it comes to, for example, maternity leave, when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to ZUS,
52
just the social
weeks?
security and the insurance that you get from the government is actually quite good, even though you have to pay into that. The fact that you don't have a lot of debt when you graduate university is a
Oh,
huge
that's
plus. I like
nice.
Poland because it has
Hmm.
a lot of capitalistic tendencies, but it borrows from Europe in a lot of ways, where there's a lot more protection focused on the worker instead of big corporations, even though here in Poland it is still quite capitalistic. You must take 14 consecutive days at the minimum of vacation, and you get 20 to 26 days paid mandatory leave. Whereas in the US, you have
Oh,
0 days legally required. You get an average of 10 to 15 days, but often combines unpaid
that is
and paid
awesome.
sick leave. And Polish people actually use their vacation without guilt. I think Europeans in general are totally cool with using their vacation. Maternity leave here is quite
I want
generous, at
that.
least compared to America. I think America is probably like the worst place to raise a family because just there are no
Yes.
protections for mothers that want to go on maternity leave, but it seems that that's still somewhat encouraged here in Poland. One of the cool things I like about this country is that as a young person, if you're under 26, you do not have to pay income tax. So all the money that you get goes directly
What
to your
the
pocket. You
heck? For
graduate
real?
university with little debt or no debt, and you get 0 income tax until you're 26. Most things, if you're a student, are also half
Oh
price.
my
For
god,
example,
that is
public
awesome.
transportation tickets, even the trains going to other cities, public transportation for the metro or tram in the city, you get half price on all of it. It does seem heavily favored towards the
What
youth
the
and
hell?
allowing the younger people to be able to make more money and keep their money.
Oh my gosh, that just shows how good it is to live in Poland. That is crazy. That you don't have to pay tax until you're 26. Wow. And you get 52 weeks maternity leave? Oh man, that's a long time. That's crazy. Really good.
I think one of the most effed up parts of the US is how everybody is in debt. And credit card debt and student loan debt. There are so
Oh,
many forms of debt in
yes.
the US. It's absolutely crazy. I believe the average debt for the American citizen is around $30,000 to $40,000, if you can believe that. The biggest culprit
It's
is
true.
university and also healthcare. Americans were wealthier than many people around the world, but a lot of our economy is funded by debt. Is that really real wealth? A lot of my European friends are maybe
No.
poorer than some of my American friends, but almost none of them have student debt. Almost none of them have credit card debt. Maybe it's a consumer's culture, how there are no rules. For example, in gambling, when it comes to sports events, every sports channel and sports events now promotes gambling so much, which I think is so ridiculous. Polish people are
It
just not as
is. I agree.
materialist as Americans are. Yes, they are European, but they're like new Europeans, so they kind of have this mix of both Western and Eastern culture, which I love a lot. Now that I don't have any student loans or credit card debt, I feel so much happier and at peace. And I can't believe that the majority of Americans have to suffer through that for years, even after they graduate, right? It's kind of a
Yeah,
scam if you think about it. So let's talk about
it is really a scam. Like I know somebody who graduated a long time ago and he still have $22,000 debts. That is a lot of money. A lot of money, and that's ridiculous and a huge scam.
gun violence for a second. I personally enjoy living in countries where the vast majority of the population does not have guns. I think it heavily decreases the murder rate. I am conservative in America, but I don't agree with the population having guns. It is a lot of power for the average person to hold. I think it gives a lot of Americans this God complex that nobody can tell me what to do because I have a gun backing me up. But if you live in a
Yikes.
society where you have to defend yourself physically with fists, no weapons involved, I think it keeps a lot of people in check. I'm a Chinese guy. I'm not very tall. I'm fit. I can probably hold myself in a fight, but I am not going to be fighting these 6 feet Polish guys who look like they can beat me up, okay? So because I'm not the biggest, throughout my life, I've always had to find ways to cooperate and handle conflicts peacefully without resorting to violence. If you're in a culture where violence is a norm and everybody wants to fight, or like in the US where it's super easy for people to get a gun and everybody has a mental
Yeah,
illness nowadays for some reason, I would rather live in a country like Poland where
me
things are very safe.
too.
People are actually allowed to have guns here. The amount of guns per population is way lower than it is in the US. Also, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but if I were to send my kids to school in the US, there's always this fear in the back of your head that what if some school shooting happens? There were a couple of
I
these
think about it
situations at
too.
my high school when I was growing up. Nothing really happened, but the police were called and threats were made, and it was just this whole fiasco. Number two, the
Yeah, that's the scary part, living in the US because people have guns because, you have to protect yourself from bad people, but also it's still scary. And the school shooting is scary. Like when I have a kid, I don't think I wanna have them in the US because I'm afraid of school shooting. That's scary.
freedom from crippling medical debt. This is one of the biggest problems of the US. We have very good healthcare quality wise, but when it comes to paying for it, pricing, everything is so confusing and extremely overpriced. It's another scam, in my opinion. Here in Poland, the public healthcare is not the best. However, they do have private insurance here. LuxMed, I think, is one of the big ones. I believe it costs like a couple $100s a month, and this is for the top tier premium private insurance. Also, if you were to pay out of pocket without insurance, things cost less or the same as the copay you would pay in the US, and medication in general here is just a lot cheaper. I think a lot of people in America are so scared of going to the doctor or having anything bad happen to them because the bills
It's
that come in will just
expensive.
completely ruin people, from ambulance fees, hospital
Mm-hmm.
fees. There are so many stories about that online. In the America, if an ambulance came to my house and I stepped in the ambulance just for 1 second, boom, you get charged $2,000, 3,000, 5,000. It's
10,000.
just so unclear in the US. This is something I think about a lot, especially as I get older. Now that I'm past 30 years old, health is a much higher priority. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
freedom to not have to worry about your safety. I cannot tell you how much peace I feel being able to walk around in the city at any point during the day or nighttime and feel safe that nothing bad is going to happen to me. I think the worst extreme was when I was in Colombia, Latin America, and I was on edge all the time, even though I lived in one of the safest cities in Colombia. Now I live in Warsaw. It's a capital city, and considering that it's a capital city, it's very safe and there's very low levels of crime here. Homogenous societies in general tend to be a lot safer, especially countries that have a proper winter. There is a correlation between temperature and crime rates, actually, if you guys didn't know about it. But also, I believe Poland as a country has this sense of doing what's right and what's wrong. They're very similar to a lot of Asian countries. We just have a societal standard for what's correct and what's not correct. Police officers here enforce the law, and I believe in general society does respect police officers. Whereas in
That's
America, it's
good.
this weird 50-50 split where there's a lot of people that are fighting against law enforcement in your own country and supporting people breaking the laws. I think one of the things that Asians and Poles have in common is a standard of cleanliness and order, but also an adherence to the rules, right? If somebody breaks the rules, they should be arrested or jailed. And there's a pretty hard line on what's correct and what's not correct. Whereas in America, it feels like things are a lot more moldable. You should be able to say, hey, I don't want people coming into my country illegally, and I want the government to enforce our laws of our country. But saying that in America makes you a racist, makes you a Trump lover, makes you a Republican, all this BS. For me, the most important thing
Yeah,
is
this
not
is so
what feels
true.
good, but what actually works to help maintain a proper society. And I think safety
I
and rule
agree.
and order is the number one thing that you need to prioritize, because once you have that foundation of rule and order, then you can build everything on top of that. And a lot of people just have this weird disrespect for the police when they're just trying to do their job. Look, are there bad police officers out there? 100%. Are they the majority? Heck no. And it's really difficult to be a police officer. And this is why I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement in general, because a lot of these guys are just trying to do their job. I'm not trying to justify
Hmm.
bad police officers. I would rather live in a society that overall has a respect for law enforcement rather than try
Me
to
too.
impede law enforcement from doing their job. Something to think about. And this is why, if you have the means, I highly recommend living in other places. If you have Polish descent, so your parents or your grandparents are from Poland, you are able to come back to the country without problem. There's just some documentation that you have to do to prove that you're Polish. If you're a wealthy individual, I highly recommend getting a second passport. There are a lot of countries around the world
Oh,
that offer citizenship by investment, by family, by real estate. For example, if you have an EU passport, you can stay in any European country without a problem. I highly recommend working
that's
with my friend
nice.
Raphael at The Wealthy Expat. The world now is so crazy. We have no idea what's going to happen from year to year. So being able to have that flexibility and be able to move when you need to is very important. If you guys are interested in that and you have a high net worth,
That was a really good video, and I really agree with him that I'd rather live in a country that is safe. Like, it's ridiculous that when you walk in the US and you have to keep looking at your back because you're worried that somebody might stab you or shoot you. That is crazy. And yeah, I think Poland is a great country to live. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.